Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. Today's guest is Wendy Rose Williams, a certified spiritual teacher, hypnotherapist, author, and past life adventure guide. Today's discussion, life between lives. Wendy, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks, Johnny. It's just such a pleasure to speak with you.
Now, you have many memories of past lives. I'm not sure quite how far they go back, but what are some of those experiences that really stand out?
Some of the experiences that really stand out, I try and dwell on the lives that I enjoyed. Because yes, most of us have work to do to release things. And I'm fortunate. I feel like I've worked through a lot of that. So I like to focus on some of the fun ones, some of the ones that I would call even rest lives, reward lives, vacation lives, or ones where I was working on things that I'm working on again now that I enjoy.
I like that idea. And we could go through the different sections and maybe even some of the lives that were not so much fun. But I like what you just said, rest lives and vacation lives. There are several different types then, right?
Absolutely. I feel many of us incarnate hundreds, if not thousands of times. So you just get to make a lot of choices because you don't learn difficult or complex things like forgiveness. You can't master that in a lifetime. It's just not possible. So there might be quite a few lifetimes where you're working on that one lesson.
If you can give us some examples, that would be great.
Sure. Well, I found I had a lot of lives that led up to me becoming a writer in this lifetime, for example. And often, and I find this with clients too, and when I'm facilitating past life regression sessions for them, a lot of times there'll be a scribe type of lifetime or many lifetimes where people were in the monasteries, in the nunneries, in sacred temples, and they were copying scrolls or copying sacred books, those types of things to preserve it because, hey, guess what? It wasn't exactly the internet and make a quick photocopy of it.
They didn't have Google Drive back then, right?
There was a lot of scribing going on or hieroglyphics on the walls. Go back as far as you want. And so there's those types of things. And then maybe the person did something really simple but meaningful to them, like kept a diary or a journal. And of course, there's all the oral storytelling that went on in many cultures that didn't have a written language. So there can be lots of lifetimes like that are leading up to now maybe the person's got a newspaper column or is, a very early, what we'd now call a journalist or a reporter, that type of thing.
You discovered many of these past life memories through past life regression therapy sessions that you went through before, and then you went to do the life between lives sessions. That's a type of past life regression, is it not?
You're exactly right. Your memory's perfect. So
that's a
the
relief.
You're closer to Venus all the time.
Yes, you said it, not me.
So the very first lifetimes that I recalled two during a past life regression, which would have been in 2011. And then a year later, in 2012, I had my first Life Between Lives session with a Michael Newton therapist. And then from there, I learned to meditate and I started to remember my dreams, and they came in many other ways. But that was my path.
Before you start telling us about some of the past life memories, how can we tell that these memories are not just dreams or fantasy?
That's a great question, and a lot of people worry, what if I'm making stuff up? Please try and let go of the worry, because even if you're fabricating, even if it's fantasy, even if you're, just visualizing or imagining, there's a reason that your subconscious is going there as you're dreaming. Dreams, as an example, just serve so many purposes. But how you can differentiate, might this actually be a past life that you truly lived rather than an archetype or rather than something from the collective consciousness, is typically the dreams have a different quality to them. They're just very vivid. They're memorable. They can often be recurring, and just there's something different. Also, there's a different time and place. You're not dreaming in current day. So if you're dreaming and you're walking down the city street and you're looking around at the gas lamps and you're looking at the cars and you're going, oh my goodness, these look like, I don't know,
Is this in
cars from the 1920s? Exactly. Well, just go with it. Just see what happens, because you may be having a very interesting past life recall. You can't harm anyone by fantasizing.
Since you just mentioned recall, there's different ways to access these memories. It can be in hypnotherapy. With past life regression, it could be spontaneous recall. It could be through a dream. Often when we have a dream, we wake up and we think, okay, that was cool, or that was weird, or that was this, and then it just evaporates.
It's just gone.
Yeah,
exactly.
Whereas these type of memories or these dreams, you remember them and they recur.
Exactly. And there's emotion. That's one of the other big hallmarks. Because if you're just fabricating or fantasizing, same thing happens during the past life regression. If someone has this very meaningful experience and they're crying, or they're just really feeling emotion, and it's over quickly, but there's this wonderful cathartic release that's going on. And then after it, they say to me kind of sheepishly, oh my gosh, I think I made that all up. Well, if you made up a story, why did it tap that well of emotions where you were actually crying?
Right.
It just made up stories don't do that.
Have you had experiences in your work as a regressionist where someone comes back to the present, I guess, and they say nothing happened, when in actuality you have an audio recording and they were actually giving information, they just were not aware of it? Have you had that happen?
Yes, that can happen. I'm actually one of those clients, and I don't say nothing happened. I don't remember any of the detail because I'm so busy. I'm just so wonderfully in another place and time, and I'm just describing it. So I don't consciously recall it.
Right.
So I really depend on my recordings, and my recordings are always a surprise to me, and I can connect so many dots through them, and I get so much more healing and information once I hear my own recordings of me as the client.
My experience when this has come up, where people have had these sessions and they either don't remember the details, or they fell asleep, or they just think that nothing happened. And then the therapist will say something like, well, actually it did. And they press play on the recording. And it's pretty interesting.
It is interesting.
Speaking of which, pick a life that you remember from the past that is fun, or I don't want to lead you into anything, but I'm sure a lot of people are very curious, because curious minds want to know.
My absolute favorite past life was in the 1300s, and I was born in Germany, and I chose an interesting, surprising path where I became what you would call a pirate, and I was a female. But what we were actually doing, we were mainly in the North Seas, and we were delivering affordable food to the people in a time of war, and the governments were corrupt. So we were technically called Robin Hood pirates.
That's really
but
interesting.
The freedom in that lifetime, the daring, and it's so funny because I don't think of myself as this like courageous person, in that way where there truly was physical danger, but the beauty of just that landscape and being in those fjords and just doing what we felt was right and just being able to move around like that. And I have to admit, I'm not always fond of authority. Yes, we need law and order to be living in civilized cities, etc. But the laws aren't always just. And sometimes you've got to act or speak against them. So that's why it was such an intriguing lifetime to find.
Once a pirate, always a pirate. Very, very interesting. So during that experience, were you ever conscious of the fact that you were either in a dream, a lucid dream, or just aware that this is a memory and, oh, by the way, I need to call somebody, where's my cell phone? Or were you completely separate of that?
Great question. That past life recall actually came through having a Reiki session with a friend. And I had the whole Reiki healing. It was wonderful. It was so relaxing. And he said, "Oh my goodness, do you have one more minute?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "May I share a past life impression with you?" I said, "Certainly." And he started describing and narrating and saying, "Oh, I'm seeing this ship. It's got many masts. It's in this, beautiful geography and these steep cliffs." He didn't know the word fjord. So as he was talking about it, I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm in a fjord." And we were like narrating it together.
So you and the therapist both remembered it, or how did that work?
Yes, the Reiki master, who is a psychic. So he first got the impression of it and was saying it's for you to kind of set yourself free and feel more free in your lifetime today. And my one question to him as we were visioning this together, just having this, 3D conversation, we could both see it. My question to him was, did I hold on to my power? That's my one question from that lifetime. And he said, yes, you did. And that was very hard to do as a female pirate with this incredible, shall we say, rough and ready crew. There were not a lot of females, but I was married to a man that's pretty infamous. And to my surprise, I was able to look him up and found it on the internet. I knew nothing about this band of pirates, but my guides gave me enough clues and said, look on the computer and we'll tell you how to find it. And I found it right away. And I could just feel such chills down my back.
Who was it? Was it a recognizable name, or?
I was married to Klaus Stortebeker, who is considered the most infamous North Seas pirate of our time, late 1300s, early 1400s.
Wow. With some of these people that you remember from some of your past lives, do you actually run into them again in this life? You're smiling, so I guess I know the answer to that.
You're reading my mind. That's exactly where I was going to go.
I'm not a mind reader. I do not have superpowers. Everybody, please note, I am just a regular guy, but thanks for the compliment. I like that.
You've got good intuition, let's put it that way. Yes, I was able to recognize who had been my husband, and it's my former boyfriend that woke me up spiritually. And I also recognized the woman that was my sister in that lifetime that I just loved and spent a lot of time with. We were often not on the ship. We were considered scouts, and we would go ahead into different towns and cities, and then we would be deciding, okay, where does food need to be, shall I say, liberated from, and where does food need to be brought to? So we were trying to just help manage the food supply for people, and we would then go down onto the water, and we would use lanterns, and we would signal our own ship when it was safe to come in and either be doing pickups or deliveries. So she and I were often on land, and I recognized her as my former boyfriend's mother. So two people.
Was your boyfriend one of the pirates, or was he someone else?
He was the pirate I was married to. He was Klaus Stortebeker.
Is he aware of that, or not necessarily?
Yes. When I asked him later, may I share a past life impression with you? And he said yes. I said, okay, let me just say a sentence or two, because you want people to be able to have their own recall too, and you can learn more information. And the minute I told him, he just burst out laughing. And we were in his home at the time, and without a word, he just pointed to this plaque that was to the right of his desk, and it was all about being a pirate.
Right. Wow.
We just had so many things. I did go through a stage of going, oh gosh, this is just a bunch of fantasy, because that's the type of life you're like, oh wow, I just made this up to, make my ego happy or whatever. So I asked my guides, I said, prove it to me. Please show me more evidence. Please confirm this for me. I want to explore and be as accurate and honest in this as I can. And they said, go look at your costume, your Halloween costume that you purchased. So I go to the closet, I pull it out. I had never seen this label in it. The label inside it, at the back of the dress, it read Pirate Queen. I was like, it's good to ask for validation.
Yeah, it is. So in this case, you can actually ask your spirit guides for verification, and very much in the way that a medium will try to
Yes.
present evidence, for lack of a better
Exactly.
word. We've talked about the in-between life space where our soul or our consciousness goes into when it isn't incarcerated, when it is not incarnated in a body. Now, past life regression
Yes.
has become fairly popular these days, but not so much the life between lives. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. So, what the life between lives is, and that was such an interesting Freudian slip, Johnny, because a lot of people do feel trapped.
Incarcerated?
And the incarcerated word comes up rather than incarnated. But what life between lives is, it's a technique that's specific to the Michael Newton Institute. But using between lives is kind of the broader context. It simply means you're not in a body, you're in pure soul form. And it's this marvelous process where you're working with the hypnotherapist and you go back earlier in time. You may see some scenes from this lifetime, and then you go back to the womb from this lifetime. And that is fascinating because you can learn all kinds of things of when did the soul join the body? Why did I choose this body? What am I planning for my life? Why did I choose these parents in this location? Why did I choose that? I believe souls choose their parents and the parents have to agree because it's got to be the right time for the parents. I believe it's a mutual decision, but I believe that the baby soul, so to speak, the new incoming baby chooses and parents agree. So we can learn lots of fascinating things in the womb. And then we go back further during the life between lives or in a between lives session, and we leave the body, we raise our vibration, so we're in pure soul form, like in a near-death experience where you've left the body and you're going up and up and up to the light. And you go through this process where you cross over the astral plane, you're way up above the trees, you're up in the sky, and you cross over through a gateway, and you're now home. Take the religious words out of it. You're home, you're with the light, you're with the universe. Sure, some call it heaven, nirvana, whatever. But you're not in a body, and you're in that place that you go between lifetimes when you're not incarnated. It's amazing. So a greeter or a guide is called in for you by your therapist, and they help you orient. And you might go to a place of healing. Typically, people go to a place of healing first, because don't we all need healing of some sort?
I've read that in one of Dr. Michael Newton's book. I think it was Journey of Souls, where some of us maybe have had kind of a rough ride are sent to therapy, just like people who've done really horrible things like murderers. There was an episode that I've coming up that deals with this, where a murderer killed his girlfriend, shot her 2 daughters. The daughter survived, and then their family contacted a medium. She did a reading, and the man, the boyfriend, came through as well as the girlfriend that was murdered. What the medium saw with the boyfriend was that he was in almost like an interrogation room with his guides, because he had to see the atrocity and he had to feel the pain that he caused. Now, this type of thing, is that similar to what happens in the life between lives, which might have something to do with the Council of Elders?
Yes. And we'll return to the piece around souls that have committed atrocities that were unplanned. I think that's like a separate box. So we're there and have those different types of healings. We can reunite with soul family and soul group. And that's just an absolute highlight of the session for many people, because they more
It has to be incredible.
Yes, because you're feeling such unconditional love. There is no judgment. The weather is always perfect. You don't have to concern yourself with these details called gravity and breathing and eating and sleeping, and you can instantly manifest anything you want and need.
Anything?
It truly is.
So if I'm a surfer,
Ride that wave.
I can manifest perfect barrels in any one of my favorite Santa Barbara beaches all day long.
Go for it, because that might be what your soul needs to just rise up and to just feel so fantastic. Yeah. Because the healing comes in different ways. Some people go to beautiful gardens and create all sort of scenes there. Other people go into these bays, almost like a car wash bay where you do the self car wash, but it's unique to each person. They might be lying on like this beautiful crystal bed, but there's all types of like lights and maybe different elements like water and fire, and the sounds, just the most beautiful sounds, like the heavenly choir that absolutely heal you from the inside out. So there's just so many things going on of what you need for healing and what people experience. So typically healing first and then reunite with the soul group.
Right.
And then at a certain point, you sit down and you may get some counseling from your guide. And typically then you're prepped and it's the time to go meet with the Council of Elders, which some people call the karmic board. I want to take judgment out of it. There is no judgment. So we're then at the point where we're ready to meet with the Council of Elders or with what's called the karmic board.
The audio dropped out right as he started talking about the karmic board.
Okay, so evidently they don't want the karmic board, so I'm not going to talk about that.
You think the audio dropped out because your guides don't want you to talk about the karmic board?
Yes, I do, because evidently it's not helpful to the audience.
Okay, so I'm going to take that cue, switch gears, and we'll get back to this. But you mentioned crystals before. I'm going to go out on a limb. You had apparently...
Okay, Shirley.
I'm not Shirley.
Oh, I was thinking of Shirley MacLaine's Out on a Limb.
All right. So you're cutting out right now. So I think the guides don't want you to talk about that either. But anyway, you mentioned crystals, right? You had also told me before that you remember lives from Atlantis and Lemuria. Mm-hmm. That is incredibly fascinating. I believe Plato did talk about that as well as other philosophers from that time and even before that. Can you give us an example of what some of your memories were from that? And then when you transition back to the in-between space, then what happened?
So I have a really fun memory from Lemuria, and I had a feeling that I had been a preschool teacher. So I traveled to Mount Shasta, California, and drove there the first time from Seattle, 555 miles.
Can you give a brief description of what Lemuria is or was?
I see Lemuria as an ancient civilization. I believe that the landmass of Earth was different and has changed a lot. We know continental drift. We know a lot of the changes that have come up geographically over millennium. But I believe that Lemuria was considered an advanced civilization where people were able to live on Earth in a body for thousands of years. And I believe at some point that continent went down, and it was known that it was going to go down. There was a war that took place with Atlantis. So much for being an advanced civilization if we've got two that go to war together.
Approximately how long ago was this?
I don't know. I don't have a good sense of time. It's interesting because I travel so much in time. I have to literally look at the computer to tell you what today's date is.
It's at least 10,000 years ago.
I was going to say, I'm hearing right now, my guides are saying at least 10,000 years, just what you just said. So I believe that part of Lemuria was saved. Telos, Telos, was a city in Lemuria. I believe it's now inside Mount Shasta in California. And when I traveled to Mount Shasta with friends for the week, we did a sacred site tour. And we were taken by a guide and went to some wonderful places. One of the meditations we did was to go inside Telos and to return there and just explore if we had any past lives. Mm-hmm. So immediately, my past life it turned out to be a preschool teacher came up. And what I experienced during that meditation, sitting there at Mount Shasta on the mountain, was I'm in the classroom. I'm a new teacher. I'm looking around at these adorable little faces because I discover I'm a preschool teacher. It was like a moment out of Star Trek because there's all these different beings from all these different planets. And I'm looking at them thinking, okay, I'm up here in the front. I've got the most simple whiteboard and blackboard. How do I communicate with them? Because I'm just assuming they're going to all be speaking all different types of languages because they're clearly creatures from all different planets.
What did the architecture look like? What did the classroom look like? Did it look like something from Star Trek? Or was it prehistoric? Or was it a combination?
It looked pretty simple and basic, like a normal classroom today. I was feeling nervous. I think it was probably the first class I taught. That's why I remembered this and had it come up. And I'm just thinking, what do I teach them and how do I teach them? So I'm looking at the adorable little kids and they're just like all looking at me like, yay, we're here. What do we do? And then I'm turning around to look at what my tools are. And all I discover is the whiteboard and the blackboard. And I'm kind of like, oh gosh, that's it. So I'm asking my guides, what do I do? How do I work with these kids and help these kids? What am I supposed to be teaching them? And can they speak English? And my guides clearly said, you're here to teach them telepathy. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting because we all use telepathy at home. Don't they already know telepathy? These are like 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. Don't they remember their telepathy? And my guide said, you're just giving them a little refresher because they're not used to being telepathic in a body. And that's why you're seeing them in all these different body forms. So just communicate with them telepathically like you would at home and just have fun because yes, they're very, very young. So that's what we did.
I think this type of material might need an entire episode unto itself. But from that life, when you went back, when you transitioned back into the between lives.
The between lives space.
Right. When you went home, as I guess we do in between, when we exchange bodies for new ones, did you go through the same type of process with the healing? And at what point did you go into the soul contracts and decide when or how you were going to incarnate next?
I don't remember the debrief for that lifetime in particular. It was just more, I think it was more like a confidence builder of I can just always figure it out. The other subject I taught those preschool children from all over the galaxy was astral travel. So that's quite an interesting preschool, isn't it?
Oh my, I wish I could have done that when I was in preschool.
Asked to go there in a dream.
That's coming up. That's actually the episode, I think, right before this, where we talk about the astral traveling and the astral bodies and so on. In some, it seems like there is definitely an in-between space where we get some therapy if we need it, and then we figure out what we need to work on, and we come back. And do we decide on what bodies that we're going to come back in, or is that done in like a counseling session?
Great question. So each time we go home, there's a debrief. There's a life review where we go before this council of elders. Think of them as loving, just highly wise beings, no judgment. And we get the life review for the life that we've just had and look at what we did. How well did we maximize the lessons that we set out, the life path, the life purpose? And also, what did we cause for other people? What emotions? We feel those emotions that we caused for other people. And it often comes down to, it really is the little stuff. I could feel one of them yesterday. My mom came over to my house. I was working. I was super focused trying to finish things because I had a 6:00 deadline last night. And she just asked me the simplest question. And she said, will you please come look at the photo album? I just put together pictures from Tara, my eldest daughter's wedding. And I just hesitated because I didn't want to, because I didn't want to be interrupted. I just wanted to finish what I was working on. But I could hear my guide say, oh, for gosh sakes, Wendy, take a break. It's only going to take 5 minutes and it's really important to your mom. And you just have like this nice moment you can have with her. So get over yourself and say yes and go look at the photo album with her. So I did. And it was really nice. But they were like literally showing me, this is going to be in your life review. You need to go do this.
Really?
The littlest things.
So spirit guides and the elders of the Council of 12, are they often the same beings, or is there a hierarchy as there is with angels?
Are they the same beings, meaning do you have the same council of elders every time?
I'm told all of us have guides, every one of us. And we can have like up to 6 or 7. I haven't figured out who mine are. I might never. But when you go before that council, are the council like a rank above spirit guides, or can they actually be the same beings?
I believe the council are more knowledgeable, higher vibration, more evolved. I believe they know more than our guides because typically our guide goes with us to the Council of Elders.
Okay.
And the guide is often standing kind of like just behind us, a little bit to our left as support. And sometimes they'll like whisper encouraging things in our left ear to help us, be there before council. It can feel a little intimidating. In my first life between lives that I had with a Newton therapist, we were going through all these different steps and stages. But the first time we went before council, I got so nervous because I thought it was going to be this like judgment. I was confusing it with like court. It can feel like it because often you're standing and they're seated and they might be on like a more of a raised platform. But when you look at their faces and when you feel the energy from them, it's pure love. They often will ask you, well, how do you think you did? Why don't you do the debrief? And now it's like a performance evaluation in our world. Guess who's the harshest person?
We have to decide.
We have to decide. They will point out things. They will help you understand better how you did in your life and what the ripple effects were from the decisions that you made. And they help compare and contrast it to other lifetimes potentially. So you go through that process and then you have recreation at home. You can just enjoy, like you with the wave, create those perfect waves and just go surfing.
I've been told that this space, a lot of it looks like Earth. It's just like a better version where you can create what you want. In other words, I can manifest, I want to jam with Jimi Hendrix, Prince, and David Bowie. And I'll even get one of those guys to play bass for me. And I'll get Keith Moon on drums. I can do that.
Absolutely.
That sounds too good to be true, right?
Home is a timeless, spaceless place. So I believe we can just create what we want and need. So some people see themselves living in these beautiful homes. Other people see themselves living in the woods or by water. It's just whatever makes your heart sing. It's whatever you want to create. And yes, you can have those amazing, it could be a reunion that you want to have with those musicians. You may have known them in previous lives, or you may just admire and enjoy what they created that you want to spend some time with them.
Right. I'm curious to know, when someone does atrocious things, do you have a memory of a life like that where, again, you had to go before the council of elders? What happens then to somebody that causes grievous harm to others?
I believe we have all played every part because our soul craves experiences to progress. So we've all been on every side of the equation. So you have been a robber, you have been a murderer, you have been a rapist. So have I. We've also been the victims or had those things happen to us or had them happen to our spouse, our daughter, our son, someone we really cared about, where it even felt worse because it happened to, that loved one, and we weren't able to keep them safe, and we see the impact on them. I believe some of those lifetimes are planned, as harsh and crazy as that may sound. I just recently healed a really gnarly past life of my own like that, where I'd known about the past life for quite a while, but I wasn't ever really willing to look at it because I found it too depressing and too scary. So I'll just say it in a sentence or two, because I've healed it and now I understand what it was about. So for a long time, I had memories of having been a woman married to a man who had some serious issues, was very abusive, not only to me, but I had a really strong intuition that he was a serial killer, that he was killing people. And what do you do when you are trapped or feel trapped in a marriage like that and suspect that your spouse is doing something absolutely horrible, but you just don't see how to get away? That was really hard to look at. So we were able to heal that lifetime by working with an angel healer. She was able to ask our permission and pull both of us up to our higher selves. The three of us went up to the light together and we said, was this an agreement? Do I know this person? This man that was my husband, was he really doing these things? And did I agree to this? And if so, why? What we discovered, he turned into this amazing, beautiful golden light, begged my forgiveness, but reminded me we did have a contract to do that lifetime together. It was for me to learn forgiveness, and it was for me to learn boundaries and how to take care of myself, and that sometimes you need to get the heck out of Dodge. Because I could have run away. I probably would have been killed, starved, whatever, but I needed to overcome my fear. And you know what? That would have been a better outcome than have stayed there for so long feeling trapped by this horrible man. So it definitely was a lesson in for God's sake, stand up for yourself. So that was what it was about. And then we were shown all these beautiful lives we'd had together. And we had been in Greece and just wonderful, beautiful. And he actually kind of was coming through as one of the Greek gods. So it, kind of got archetypal and mythology.
Was this after or before when he was an abuser?
It was before, and it was why I agreed to live this really gnarly life with him, because I knew I'd be pulling from the positive that we'd had before, but just needed to step up. So I got a tremendous healing, and it also was interesting. It did like a healing for my left cheek and jaw that had never felt like quite right in this life. That was from this terrific slap I had taken from him, a punch, and it had broken my cheekbone and potentially jaw, and I'd suffered with that for decades in that lifetime.
It seems like this gives new meaning to things happen for a reason. That's what it sounds like. So what do you feel are the biggest takeaways for the Life Between Life space?
The biggest takeaways are you can absolutely go to that space because you just learned so much. You can do it certainly through a formal session and have a hypnotherapist or another healer help you raise your vibration and go there. You can simply ask as you're falling asleep, even though you feel like, oh gosh, I don't know how to connect. I don't know who my guide is. I don't know if I even have one. Just make the request as you're falling asleep. Please help me have a meaningful dream. Help me heal while I'm sleeping at night. Help me more understand my life. Help me get more integrated in my life. Help me raise my vibration. Just the mere intent and being willing to ask, even though you don't know what's going to happen, even though you feel like, I don't know how to do it, it is so valuable. And that allows our guides, because I believe Earth is a free will planet and that our guides or angels, whatever you see as, helpful beings, can be your own higher self, your own intuition. It's not going to fully blossom unless we ask for the help and give permission. That's why I was told during my near-death experience, you've got to be willing to try to get on your hands and knees and go to the phone, or we can't help you. That's why the angels told me that.
Right. I think that's really good practical advice for someone that is interested in raising their vibe, being more enlightened. Wendy, thanks so much for joining us today. How can our listeners find out more about you?
Via my website, wendyrosewilliams.com, and listeners are welcome to request a complimentary 15-minute phone appointment with me, and let's just talk about how can I be of service to you. Also, I've got a podcast called Waking Up Spiritually, wakingupspiritually.com.
You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. If you really liked it, you can also leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.